Hi there, this is I think video number 4 we're on now, looking at supply restriction, and this one is aimed more at prescribers who might get a task a bit like this. Ignore that bit, but essentially access to medication needs to be reviewed, the medication the patient's requested, and then some instructions. Please launch supply restriction template from the black double exclamation patient status alert, that's this one up here. This will provide more details and options to record the outcome. So if I click on that, that will launch our new supply restrictions template. What we're trying to do here, similar to lots of other templates, I suppose, like prescribing overview and pathology ones, is both display the information you might want that might help you assess and make some decisions, and also give you ways to record the outcomes and ways that will then sort of appear in future. So let's just go through it. The med review status is that basically their annual review is outstanding. There is no supply restriction in place, and the kind of current duration hasn't been specified, as in it's not been coded in the system. Possible reasons for reviewing supply restriction is med monitoring outstanding. You can see then here the bloods that are due that relate to, it's broader, it's not just things that relate to medication monitoring. You would display them all if there are bloods needed for med monitoring. Meds requiring monitoring, so ACE or an ARB and then a lipid regulating agent. If they are, say, methotrexate or something, that'd be a red circle and exclamation mark. Obviously, you know about that. Sorry, I'm so used to doing videos for non-prescribers, non-clinical staff, and probably need to slightly reconfigure. You can see what invites they've had recently. I think in sort of real patients, this is a test patient, you're more likely to find more invites that have gone than this. And then this is where we've had information added from the med monitoring checks protocol or the supply checks protocol. And basically, you can kind of see then a bit the logic of what the system's doing, at least hopefully you can. So if you look in the notes, someone may run proactive checks. The monitoring of Rampril is overdue. It's been requested by the patient and reduction to 2 weeks is advised. The system's then moved to our supply restriction policy protocol. It's documented that your practice policy in this instance is to always review by a prescriber. Sometimes it might be that that's not your policy, but either because, say, the patient's under 18, they're currently pregnant, or it could be that their meds can't be restricted, so they're just on inhalers. For those reasons, the system might direct staff to send a task. It's also possible, of course, that the staff member doing it is just not confident or not sure, and so we would, in training and things, would always recommend that if they're not sure what to do with restricting access to medication, that it should go to a prescriber. So that's the kind of thinking there. You can also see outstanding reviews. You can see what they've currently got on repeat. I guess the other thing that we perhaps will add on here that immediately springs to mind is you might be wanting to think, well, when did they last have their UNEs? Just a general rule of thumb, if things are monitored more frequently than annual, so say 3 monthly or 6 monthly or monthly, then this process will trigger if it is indeed 3 months, 6 months since those blood tests were done. With annual monitoring, it works a bit differently because we want to give a bit of space and opportunity for the patient to attend and align it with their annual review. So once we get to 14 months since the last UNE for this particular medication, they would start to trigger for higher risk monitoring invites. And then when we get to 16 months, that's when this would trigger up and fire up and say, right, we're now advising reduction to 2 weeks of medication. The system would also only do that if they've had a recent invite. So that's the information. We may well add on kind of recent bloods in here, so you might see that by the time you get here. Again, if there's other information you think would be really useful, please do let us know. On the right-hand side, you would put your notes, and as we've made a mention here, what you document here will then display here next time. And the reason and thinking behind that is that if, say, you or a colleague have reviewed this patient previously and made a decision, it's helpful to see what that thinking was. So let's say, You could just be documenting what sort of has happened, agree with recommendation, reduce to fortnightly. You would then want to update the script duration. You click that box and then you can pick the time frame, whether you've stopped, put them to daily, alternate days, weekly, fortnightly, or monthly. Long-term restriction, this is really just for patients who might be always on, say, weekly medication, which we know some patients are. That's another scenario actually where you might get a task to review it, and that can be because, again, if they're already on weekly prescriptions, it's harder to know sort of what to do and how to manage that. A couple of other options you've got here. You can run our supply restriction protocol. That will work a bit differently for you as a prescriber than it will for admin staff, but it will largely just give you the same sort of information here. The slight difference with that is that you'll find it will give you the opportunity to pick the time frame and generate a message to the patient. Similarly, there's this kind of med monitoring checks clinical, which is the same sort of checks that the systems run, but again, it's aimed a bit differently in terms of the information it provides for you. If you want to text patients from here, you can. You can obviously launch the comms annex there. To actually amend the prescription, this is a really key point. Unfortunately, it can't be automated. Just putting that into the notes is not enough. So you would need to then go to the repeat template screen and make those changes. We hope that helps. It's fairly early days of this template being in use. So I'm sure as more practices start to use it, as always, I suspect we'll get some helpful feedback and suggestions. I'm really happy to update that. Just to note again, because I've okayed it and come back in, you can see the notes from last time. So again, we hope that's helpful. We want to make it as safe as we can, but obviously up to you ultimately as prescribers as to how you want to manage your patients. Any queries, let us know. Thank you.